Well, let me start. I'm Henry Emmons. I'm an integrative psychiatrist and co-founder of Natural Mental Health. And I just want to have a chance for my colleagues to introduce themselves, Tim and Amy.
Yeah.
I'm Dr. Tim Culbert. I'm an integrative developmental and behavioral pediatrician here in the Twin Cities. And I'm happy to be here tonight. I'll be providing some of the tips for parents about how to support children and teenagers in the time of the coronavirus pandemic.
And hey, everybody, I'm Amy Prasek. I'm an integrative health researcher and health communications researcher. And I am here for you to support you through your program. I'm really happy you're here, and I'm really grateful that we're all together doing this.
So let's get started. We wanted to start by talking a little bit about why we're doing this and also to welcome you to what we're calling a resilient retreat, calm in the time of coronavirus. So like most of you, or at least many of you, we have been socially isolating for the last 2.5 weeks or so. And with the uncertainty of how long this is going to go on and just what it's going to be like, we thought we really wanted to do something, to offer something to the larger community, just to help us get through this time. I think it's apparent to all of you by now that there's really two pandemics. There's not just one. There is the coronavirus, and we're not going to be talking too much about that. We're going to try and address the second pandemic, which is the pandemic of fear. In a sense, the fear pandemic has moved across the ocean and across our country even faster than the virus. And I think we've seen some of this already, that it can be every bit as destructive. This is also a time with social distancing that we do think is really an important piece of controlling the virus, but social distancing can really pull away some of the supports that many of us just have come to rely on and need to rely on. And we wanted to see if we could do something to bridge that a little bit by using the technology and doing it virtually. There is a third aspect to what we're hoping, what we're trying to do with this, and that is that old adage that crisis equals opportunity. And I really think that in this case, that is true. I think that we've seen already how much the world has changed. And we don't know yet what that change is going to look like weeks, months, even years down the road. But I believe that we can have something to say about that, that collectively, there are things we can do, there are ways we can work on ourselves within and on our community that will make a difference in what that ultimate change looks like. So what do we hope you get from this? One, we want to offer you a lot of resources to enhance your own resilience. Resilience is incredibly important right now. I'm going to say a little bit more about that and what I mean, but resilience is so key to keeping us grounded and steady and able to face all of the difficulties that we're facing. We also hope that you'll experience some genuine connection and support. And to that end, largely thanks to Amy, we've got a lot of things going on during the week for you to tap into. There are yoga classes, Tai Chi, music meditation, a guided meditation. And we also want to try to foster an online communication, chats, and be able to connect with each other in a lot of meaningful ways. And then thirdly, we hope that we'll be giving you some tools, some ideas, some ways of thinking about things that might help you to really get creative as you chart your life post-pandemic. So the way we organized this evening, our Wednesday evenings, and we're going to be getting together here on Facebook Live for tonight and then the next 7 weeks, so a total of 8 weeks. So we're going to finish up right before Memorial Day. And what we are hoping to do is to take about 45 minutes. We hope that you'll stay with us, but if you can't, obviously you can you can go to our website and watch it later. So we'll try and limit it to around 45 minutes. We'll start with a talk, sort of a more content-based talk. We'll have a brief experiential meditation type of practice in the middle. Tim will then come on and give us a few minutes really geared towards parents or anybody who has kids, is a kid, used to be a kid, talking about ways that, that we can help younger people through this time. And then we'll end with, we'll try to save about 10 minutes or so, maybe a little more, a little less, where we can respond to questions. So during this talk, please send your questions to Amy. Is it pretty obvious, Amy, how they'll do that?
Yeah, just put them in the Facebook comments, folks, and we'll get to them. And Zoom people can participate in that by sending an email to me or replying to any of the emails that they received in the past couple days. So, yeah.
So I want to say a little bit here at the beginning about fear and about stress. And I want to say first that under these circumstances, it is completely normal to feel some fear. I have just as much fear as any of you, I'm sure. In fact, most of the things that I'm going to be talking about are things I use to help myself. But I also want to say that fear does not have to have the last word. We can keep it in check. We can allow it to arise, but then learn some skillful ways to deal with it so that fear doesn't gain a head of steam and become a problem in itself. I want to make a kind of an analogy here between the stress system and the immune system. Right now, the immune system is so important to your well-being, to your health, to getting through this time. We want our immune systems to work just the way they're meant to, which means it needs to be able to respond to a threat, but not respond too much. And it's very similar with your stress system. You need to be able to mount a response when something is threatening, and this is threatening. So it being stressed and even having a little bit of fear is in some ways it's adaptive. It's kind of a normal reaction as long as it doesn't become too strong. If your immune system response is too strong, it's actually that overreaction that can cause a lot of the damage. In fact, it's likely that people who have the worst pulmonary responses, the worst kind of reaction to pneumonia, are people whose immune system is overdoing it, overreacting, and that itself is causing some of the harm. Very similar with the stress system. If it responds too strong, it's an overreaction, we're filled with stress hormones, that can cause more harm than the original threat itself. So we wanted to be able to respond just enough and not too much. If it does that, then it gets us focused, it gets us energized, motivated, and prepares us for action. Now, it's worth saying that there's a problem that we human beings have that can make fear and stress a lot worse, and that is that we think. One of my favorite science authors, Robert Sapolsky, said humans have evolved to be smart enough to make ourselves sick. I want to tell you a little story, personal story. This is just a few days ago. I woke up in the middle of the night coughing. I coughed about 2 or 3 times, kind of a dry cough. I don't usually do that. And so it got my attention, and you can kind of imagine where my thoughts might have gone. I started thinking, I'm sick. I've got the coronavirus. I'm over 60. I'm in a high-risk category. Yes, I'm healthy, but, and you can kind of imagine where the mind goes after that. Now, I'm feeling fine now. I haven't developed any major problems, but I used a strategy, and I'm gonna kind of keep coming back to this over the course of the 8 weeks because I think it's so important. And that is that we do the best we can to stay in the present moment. So I ask myself, what am I experiencing right now at this moment? And in the middle of the night, the only thing I was really experiencing was a cough and a little feeling of congestion. So what am I experiencing right now, and can I stay with it? So most of us, what we're experiencing right now is we're fine, we're healthy, we don't have any symptoms. If you do have some symptoms, then you can still stay in the moment. What am I feeling right now? Well, just a little mild this or mild that. And what do we need to do? Well, we need to take every effort we can not to pass it on. We need to take extra good care of ourselves, keep our health up, keep our stress low, because stress suppresses the immune system. So if we stay in the moment, we've got resources and we can respond to whatever's happening, as long as we don't get too far ahead of ourselves and let thinking sort of take over. Now, resilience, in my way of thinking, resilience is the completely natural, God-given ability that we all have to face whatever we need to face and be able to deal with it with more or less skill, more or less equanimity, as much as we can hold on to. And when it is really intense or severe and it knocks us down, then we're able to get back up again and face the next thing and the next thing after that. Now, I want to point out something that I think has probably occurred to most of you, and that is, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think what we have seen for ourselves, our country, for the people around the world, is that we human beings are unbelievably resilient. We are so adaptive. You look at how much has changed in the world in the last couple of weeks and how we have kind of gone with it. And we may or may not like it, but we have changed our lives in ways that were unimaginable just a few weeks ago. So it's not that we aren't resilient and adaptive. We really are, and it's kind of amazing how much. And yet, if it goes on for too long or the stresses are just too great, we kind of run out of the juice or the elixir that I like to think we have that keeps us resilient. I like to use a metaphor, an image I just have in my mind, that inside of each of our brains, we have this container, this elixir that is what keeps us resilient and afloat. And we're using it now. We're using that elixir up because we have such a major set of things we have to respond to. And I also like to imagine that every one of us has a different capacity, a different size container, if you will. A lot of that has to do with our genetics. A lot of it has to do with our early life experiences. But what I like to keep the focus on is it's not so much how large is your capacity for dealing with stress, but it's how much are you keeping your resilience tank filled up. And a lot of what we want to do in this next 8 weeks is to talk about all the variety of things that you can do to keep yourself filled up. Now, I also think that there's something more going on here than resilience. And I want to share another little personal vignette. In the last couple of weeks, for reasons I cannot explain, I have felt unusually happy. Now, I'm a good Minnesotan, and so I don't think anybody else has noticed that, but inside I've had this great sense of well-being, and I don't really know why. My wife thinks it's because I have so much time to spend with her, and she might be right, but I want to ask, is that your experience? My friends think it's because I've been relieved of this affliction that I have called FOMO, which is the fear of missing out, because right now, there's nothing for me to miss out on, so I don't have that. But I actually like to think it's something else. And again, I can't explain it, and I'm pretty sure I won't be able to hold on to it. But I think it's because my life has been stripped down of so many extra things. It's become so simplified that it's been a lot easier for me to be present, to be more conscious, to stay in the moment. And I've also felt so much gratitude for all of the things that I usually do and enjoy, and the people I'm with who I can't be with now, and the things I can't do now, but missing them has made me realize just how much I love them. And so gratitude is part of that. But I think that this weird time that we're in has a chance to open us up in a fuller way. I want to share with you a line, a couple lines from a poem by Rilke, the poet Rilke. One of my favorite of his lines, it's from a poem called The Man Watching. I'm going to take some liberties with Rilke's words here, but not too much. Winning doesn't tempt that man. Winning doesn't tempt that woman. This is how he or she grows, by being defeated decisively by constantly greater foes. Now, what does that mean? To me, it means this. It is the stuff of our everyday lives that triggers our growth, particularly the things we think of as problems, stresses, things we don't want in our lives. Those are the foes that we face over and over again that make us grow. COVID-19 is a formidable foe. The economic distress that this has caused is a great foe. The uncertainty, the wondering, when and how will we piece our lives together is a great foe. I invite you to consider the possibility of great growth during and after this time, that this might be the sort of thing that can enlarge your resilience container bigger than it was before, even the capacity for happiness. The key, I think, is to let go of our resistance to whatever is happening. And we'll talk more about that as we go. One way for that growth to happen is to look at how the coronavirus has shattered our illusion of separation. By that I mean this belief that we are somehow separate, isolated beings. It is not true. And this is really pointing that out. It is a real paradox, in my view, that should happen at this time that we're socially distancing. And yet there are things happening that make us feel much more connected, that we're all in this together, that this is part of a shared humanity, really. The coronavirus knows no borders. It doesn't care whether we are Chinese or Italian, New Yorkers or Minnesotans. It doesn't care about the color of our skin, our sexual preferences, our religion. It does seem to care a little bit about our age. But I think that if we have the eyes to see, this is pointing out the extent of our shared humanity. Just today, I read a story that I think is an example of this, about how the coronavirus has caused this explosion of scientific collaboration around the world that is unlike anything we have ever seen. There are really good things that can happen. There's a story that happened here in Minnesota, and it's hit the national news, so a lot of you have heard this by now probably, but it's a beautiful example of this. There was a woman physician who was speeding on the interstate. She was going 85 and was picked up by a highway patrolman who scolded her for taking such a risk, for driving that fast, and went back to his car. He'd found out where she was going, what she does. She told him she's a physician, she's working in a hospital here. And when he came back, he let her off with a warning, and then he handed her license back to her along with a small stack of N95 face masks. And the woman was so moved because her hospital unit is short of face masks, is short of protective gear. And here he's giving her some of what he has been given to protect himself. And it's just that act of generosity and kindness that I think we need to keep some of our focus on right now. So the coronavirus knows no borders. Kindness also knows no borders. Find ways to spread kindness in your life like a virus. Be inventive. Be relentless. Be always open to new opportunities to be kind and generous to each other. I'm going to turn things over to Tim in a few minutes, but before I do, I want to invite you to do a a meditation with me. And this is going to be kind of an unusual meditation. It's going to be a listening meditation. So I'm going to read for you a poem. It's kind of a long poem. It really reads like a story. It's written by this poet who just writes so beautifully, Naomi Shihab Nye. And the way I'd like to do this, I'm going to just invite you to do it this way, is for you to close your eyes if that allows you to concentrate a little bit better. Let yourself just sit upright and relaxed. And without thinking too much about the words that I'm saying, just let them kind of shower you, like you're in a nice warm shower or a gentle rain. You don't have to think about them. You don't have to figure out the meaning. Just take it in, just experience it. So get ready, let your eyes close. The poem is called Wandering Around an Albuquerque Airport Terminal. After learning my flight was detained 4 hours, I heard the announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of gate 4A understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate 4A was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full Palestinian dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor, wailing loudly. Help, said the flight service person. Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her the flight was going to be 4 hours late, and she did this. I put my arm around her and spoke to her haltingly. Shu dawa, shu bida kabibti, stani shwe min fadlek, shobit zui. The minute she heard any word she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought our flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for some major medical treatment the following day. I said, no, we're fine. You'll get there, just late. Who is picking you up? Let's call him and tell him. We called her son and I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and would ride next to her, Southwest. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took up about 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling about her life, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamul cookies, little powdered sugar crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, out of her bag and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the traveler from California, the lovely woman from Laredo. We were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. There is no better cookies. And then the airline broke out the free beverages from huge coolers, non-alcoholic, and the 2 little girls for our flight, one African-American, one Mexican-American, ran around serving us all apple juice and lemonade, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing, with green furry leaves, such an old country traveling tradition. Always carry a plant, always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones and thought, this is the world I want to live in, the shared world. Not a single person in this gate, once the crying of confusion stopped, has seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can still happen anywhere, not everything is lost. The shared world. I think that's the world we want to create. Tim, you want to tell us a little bit about how to talk to kids?
I will. Well, certainly many of us share the world with children and teenagers. And it's great that we are all participating in this course in part because I think children, of course, and teenagers look to parents and adults in general to be calm and to be confident and to be in control in times of crisis like this. And so I think it's great over the next 8 weeks that we will all learn together many of these balancing strategies to build resilience and really help ourselves to manage our own fears and anxieties within the time of this crisis. And as I mentioned, kids really look to us to be in control and to step up. And in fact, oftentimes children and teenagers look at adults and gauge our response as a way of understanding whether they should fear something. And I think they really do pick up on our emotional energy, if you will. And so I think if we can learn as adults and teachers and parents to manage our own fear and anxiety, we can oftentimes then not amplify our children's fears. And I think that's a great gift we can give to them. The other thing is, as we control our anxiety, we can better communicate with kids and teenagers. We know that kids are amazingly tuned in to not just what we say, but of course, how we say it. And if we have body language and emotional tones and facial expressions or the pace and the pitch of our voice just varies a little bit, kids can really understand that maybe we're communicating and trying to say one thing, but yet acting another way. And, that is not necessarily authentic. So I think we want to be authentic, and we do really want to be as calm as we can be when we communicate with kids about these issues. I think for kids in general, we want to take our cues from our children and teens, allow them to ask questions, be available to them to talk about these things several times a day. And I think really try not to use overly technical terms. If you as a parent or an adult need to step away and take a break before you communicate with a child or a teen, I think it's important that you feel free to do that, because if you can pull yourself together, kind of center yourself and balance yourself, you're going to do a better job in general of communicating with the child or the teen about these important issues. Many kids as well, I think, are hearing information that's either inaccurate or they hear something and misinterpret it, because, the young kids in particular can definitely have magical thinking. So these are some little tips to keep in mind as you think about when and how to communicate with kids about the coronavirus pandemic. Now, what I wanted to do in terms of helping you with communication is just give you a couple of quick resources that I think are fabulous and will help you along the way. The first one is called the Child Mind Institute, and you can also find these online at our website. But the Child Mind Institute has this wonderful they've created called the Coronavirus Resource Center, and they literally have wonderful information for parents about how to communicate with children about the coronavirus and things like anxiety, discipline and behavior, and even grief and loss topics. So take a look at that. I think it's a really useful resource, and it's completely free to you to use. The second resource I wanted to mention, I just saw this today, and it's a brand new one that's been created, but there's an organization called commonsense.org, and they have created a wonderful resource I wanted to mention because I've seen so many kids in the last couple of days that have now started online schooling. And this is a resource called Wide Open School that allows you to go and look at curated homeschooling and online schooling materials for you as parents that you can use with your kids that are organized by age and are really carefully screened for quality and efficacy. So take a look at that as well, commonsense.org. And then finally, this is a really good time to be able to talk to kids about their bodies and about health and wellness in general. And there's a wonderful book called Human Body Activity Book for Kids by Katie Stokes that you can take a look at as well. It's available on Amazon. And I also wanted to share you in this theme of communication with you, this wonderful description of the coronavirus developed during a podcast called The Daily, which is provided by the New York Times. Now, this was their podcast, just so you all know, from Friday, March 27th in 2020. And I just wanted to share this with you and read a brief part of it because it's a wonderful way, I think, to help children to visualize or imagine the coronavirus. Here's a couple of snippets from that conversation. So imagine this: if you looked at the coronavirus under a powerful microscope, it would kind of look like a basketball or a soccer ball with spikes covering the surface. It is so small, it really doesn't have any color when you look at it. And it's so small as well that hundreds of coronaviruses could fit inside a mere grain of salt. Here's an interesting fact as well. Kids love this. Viruses in general infect not just humans, but in fact also infect trees, plants, insects, and animals. And it's important to understand also that viruses are not all bad. Sometimes they can be helpful. But the virus's main job in any situation is to make more virus. And so that when it gets into our body, it basically turns our body cells, at least the ones that it is invading, into factories that make more coronaviruses. And remember that most kids get a lot less sick from catching the coronavirus than adults do. So that's comforting to some extent. So that's a wonderful description, I think, for kids about the coronavirus, available at the Daily Podcast from March 27th. And then a couple of things I wanted to leave you with. I think 3 tips about empowering kids in a situation where we all feel sometimes pretty helpless and perhaps disempowered. One of the first things I want to mention is that with kids in terms of a coronavirus, there's a lot of discussion about the fact that we can't treat this virus necessarily, and we don't have a vaccine available for it yet. And that oftentimes contributes to people, panicking and feeling very much out of control. A good thing you can do with the kids in your life is to really teach them these appropriate and empowering strategies we've heard a lot about. So effective and appropriate washing, social distancing, of course, coughing or sneezing into your sleeve or into a tissue, and certainly maybe even wearing a mask. But the important thing is this: I think to work with kids in a developmentally appropriate way, teach them these skills, but then test them and see if they really know them by having them teach them back to you or teach them back to a friend via social media or maybe to a sibling. And that's a really great way to start in terms of empowerment. A second option or strategy for empowering kids is to really appeal to their sense of higher purpose and altruism. All of us want to be kind to one another, and kids and teens are the same. So I think this idea of making meaning out of this situation and helping kids and teens to feel motivated by doing something kind for others, including following these rules we just discussed, could be another great way to help them feel empowered and like they're doing something helpful in the midst of this crisis. And then finally, I wanted to mention also another great idea about empowering teens and kids, and that has to do with self-care. We know that, again, there's no direct treatment for this virus, but there are great things we all can do to support our own immune system response to the virus so that it is just the right response. And we want to optimize, as Henry mentioned, this immune system response in a way that it's not overly reacting, because that can actually cause tissue damage. We also don't want our immune system underreact, because we want our defenses to be strong and really fight off the coronavirus. So some of the best things that kids can do in this situation is really work on lifestyle practices like getting enough sleep every night, eating a very healthy diet, including lots of brightly colored fruits and vegetables, doing a good job with stress management, because chronic stress and anxiety can really deplete our immune system. And then finally, exercising. We know that exercise on a regular basis really supports and optimizes the function and the balance in the immune system. So these are just a few great ideas to begin to work with kids on, to give them back some power and help them feel like they really can do things that are meaningful in this circumstance. All right, and then I think the next section, we're going to move into questions and answers. Amy, do you have some things for us?
Yeah, Amy's sent me one here, so I'll go ahead and just say it out loud. The question is, how can you stay resilient with this impending doom? It makes one feel helpless. Actually, some of what Tim just addressed for kids would be also really appropriate for adults to do some things that are empowering for you. I also want to say there's a term that, as far as I know, I just made it up, but I like to talk about mental distancing. You know, we're doing all this social distancing, but by mental distancing, I mean, we have to be mindful of how much of the news we're taking in, how much of the gloom and doom we're consuming, if you will. We have to be a little careful if we're spending a lot of time talking to people who are fearful and kind of raising our own fear levels. So it's just a means of self-care, of kind of monitoring how much of this is good for you, and stepping back a little bit if you need to. I think it's important to be informed, but we don't have to be immersed in it all of the time. I also think that while this is a big deal, there's no question. This really is a big deal, and I wouldn't minimize it at all. But at the same time, there are some things that we can do to help ourselves, to take care of ourselves. You know, most of us are doing it now by kind of keeping hunkered down to ourselves, practicing good hygiene and so forth. So it's not that there's nothing we can do. And we're going to talk some in the next couple of weeks about sleep and what kind of foods to eat, things that might help your immune system stay better and your stress system stay more balanced. But I also think that while we cannot control much of what happens outside of us and outside of our walls, we have a lot to say about what's happening inside. And really, it is our own response and what we do with the things that we're feeling and the information we take in. That's where we have a lot of leverage, and we want to try to use that to our utmost. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about in the future sessions is how to do that.
A great question for kids is that, will kids really suffer developmentally or otherwise, spending 2 months straight watching TV shows like, for example, Daniel Tiger, Frozen 2, or basically another show of their choice? And I think this probably goes to the bigger question of really how to manage for an average kiddo their day. And here's what the experts say, I think repeatedly, that consistency and structure, so that does mean routines and schedules, actually really reduce stress for kids. So what I would certainly consider is building some media time, even recreational media time, into a very much organized schedule where you really have a balance of activities every day. I also think that we don't want to be too rigid in this kind of time frame in this situation. So I do think relaxing the rules and just kind of going with the flow makes some sense as well. So I think it's important to make exceptions. And on occasion, sure, if maybe your rule at home is that you get 1 or 2 hours of recreational media a day, maybe on occasion, if you're having a rough day or you have a kiddo that's having a meltdown, maybe go with the flow and roll with the punches a little bit, and maybe allow them to have a few extra minutes. So I think have a plan, have a set routine and schedule, but maybe really try to be flexible within that approach.
And another question I think directed to me is, how about those living alone? It seems so lonely. I get that. And I don't really have a good solution for that. I wish I did, but it is hard living alone. even under normal circumstances, it can be hard, it can be isolating. And I think, you know, with all that's going on right now, I can only imagine it is very, very challenging. So I think that, you know, you do what you can with that. If you have family or friends that are on Facebook or Zoom or FaceTime, use that, you know, try to do more than just phone calls, try to at least see people's faces, try to have some interaction. It's not the same, but it's actually not bad, at least in my experience. You still can feel like you're with somebody if you're doing your kind of normal routine things. I'll just give you a quick example. We had, with some friends, we had a date night the other night where we shared supper together in our separate houses over FaceTime. And then we watched the same movie on TV. Then we got back on FaceTime and talked about the movie. And it was actually really great and really fun, even though it's not quite the same as being together.
Another question. This is a great question. How can parents who work full-time teach kids at home, and I've been seeing many families that do this just the last couple of days, maintain any sense of inner peace? And, you know, I think to some extent this goes to this issue of multitasking versus maybe single tasking, in the sense that I think in modern life, we all actually seem to value the ability to multitask. We do a lot of that, most of us, every day. But I think, you know, one of the great gifts of this kind of situation, this crisis, is when we're at home and we have maybe some other help, we can enlist the help of our kids or our significant other, or maybe even our friends, depending on how accessible they are. But we can actually, I think, learn to slow down and maybe single task. That is to say, don't think you have to do it all in a day. Maybe take one thing at a time and do them sequentially and with more care and focus than maybe you normally would do. And I think that's what we're hoping to teach you throughout this course is, you know, ways to really strategize and rethink your daily routine in a way that you will become more resilient.
Well, I think we're about out of time. So I just really want to thank you all for coming and joining us. It really means so much to us to be able to offer something and to do this. And it's been so great working together with our team to pull this off. So thank you for being with us. We hope you come back. We'll be meeting the next 8 weeks, and don't forget about all the things happening every other day of the week, essentially. So go to the website, check out the schedule, join as many things as you can. Now, I do want to say that we are aware that next Wednesday is Passover, and so many of you may be unable to join us. If that's the case, just know that you can access the conversation afterwards, and we hope that you do. Take care, everybody.
Be safe.
Thanks.